Hello, welcome to part 3 of how to make a t-shirt quilt. I'm Stephanie Sebbing from QuiltAddictsAnonymous.com. Today we're going to be learning how to make the sashing, which is going to go in between your t-shirt quilt blocks. I have chosen a bee fabric because the mascot of my high school, which is the t-shirts we're using, was a bee, so I thought it was perfect. And what I've done here is I've lined the fabric up. This is the fold of the fabric. It's folded lengthwise with the 1-inch mark on my cutting mat grid. And the cut line, which I've already squared up, is lined up with the 0-inch line. And that'll ensure that I have a nice square cut. And now I've lined up the edge of my long ruler with a 12.5-inch mark, and then also with the 0-inch and the 1-inch, and at the bottom it's also lined up with the 12.5-inch mark. So that way when I cut it, I get a nice square 12.5-inch by the width of fabric rectangle. Alright, now I already have another piece cut, along with the sashing for the cornerstone part, and I've chosen just a maroon solid because I think it will go well with my t-shirts, and this is going to be for the cornerstones. So I'm taking one of the pieces that I cut to 12.5 inches wide, and I'm lining up the edges with the edge of the cornerstone, and I'm going to sew those together with a 1/4-inch seam. And if you've never quilted or you've never sewn a 1/4-inch seam before, make sure you practice with some scrap fabric first before you use your regular, or before you use the fabric for your quilt, so that way you don't waste fabric or you don't have to spend a lot of time ripping out stitches if it's not correct. Now my machine, I've got it set so that it will sew a 1/4-inch as long as I keep the fabric in line with the edge of my presser foot here. So every few inches, I just kind of position the fabric before it goes through the needle so that it will stay in line as I'm sewing. You might hear my dog in the background there. He really loves his frog, and that's what he is playing with right now. Alright, so now I'm going to set the seam, and to do that I just put the hot iron over the seam line that I just sewed, and that kind of helps the stitches sit in even with the fabric. And now I'm gently opening the cornerstone that we just sewed on, and I'm picking up and moving the iron every time I need to press over that, because the last thing you want to do is move your iron all over like you're ironing a shirt. You just want to gently press your seams open. Otherwise, you're going to end up with wonky curved seams instead of nice crisp ones. And it's going to cause a problem when you start your quilt. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this to 3 inches wide, because that's the width that our sashing is going to be before we sew it in. My ruler upside down there. So what I'm doing here is I am lining up my 3-inch edge with the edge of this, and this is not quite straight. It isn't always on the edges of your fabric. So I'm kind of overcut here. So I'm lining up an inch line with the seam. Use that as my square edge. And then I'm going to flip this around and even up this edge here to 3 inches so that I know that I have nice square edges throughout. And really accurate cutting will make your quilts turn out much better. So do take your time when you're cutting. Don't just rush through it because you want to get to the sewing portion, because you'll end up regretting it later if you don't spend your time there. So now I'm going to take the other section that we cut earlier, and we didn't sew the cornerstones to, because you only want the cornerstones attached to the sashing piece that's going to go on the top of your quilt, or at the top of the quilt block. And again, I'm going to overcut this because we don't want to use the selvage edge. And to find out how many of these pieces you need to cut for your quilt, go to QuiltAddicts.com or QuiltAddictsAnonymous.com. /tutorials, and all the measurements will be there. And again, that's quiltaddictsanonymous.com /tutorials. Alright, so you're going to cut as many of those as the fabric requirements require. And then next time, I'm going to teach you how to sew these together so that you have the blocks ready to lay out and decide where you want to put them in your quilt. So come back next week to quiltaddictsanonymous.com and we'll learn the next step on how to make a t-shirt quilt. Happy sewing!